You know the Sinaloa Cartel? The Gulf Cartel? Even El Chapo's empire. But what if I told you the most terrifying criminal organization in Mexico's history was not built by drug dealers at all? Meet Los Zetas, elite soldiers who became the architects of unimaginable horror. Today we dive into how Mexico's own military created a monster that would terrorize an entire nation, rewrite the rules of organized crime, and ultimately destroy itself from within. This is the story of Los Zetas, and it is one that will haunt you. Los Zetas was not born in the slums or the drug fields. It was born in the barracks of Mexico's most elite military unit. In 1997, Ociel Cardenas Guillen, the ambitious leader of the Gulf Cartel, faced a deadly problem. Rival cartels were hunting him. The government was closing in. He needed protection that money alone could not buy. So he turned to Lieutenant Arturo Guzman de Sena, call sign Z1, a decorated officer from GAFE, Grupo Aeromóvil de Fuerzas Especiales. These were not ordinary soldiers. They were Mexico's equivalent of Navy SEALs, trained by Israeli commandos and U.S. Special Forces in counterinsurgency, urban warfare, and psychological operations. Guzman de Sena made Cardenas an offer that would change Mexico forever. Give me enough money, and I'll bring you an army. Within months, 31 elite soldiers had deserted their posts. They traded their Mexican flag for cartel colors, their oath to protect for a promise to destroy. Each deserter received a radio call sign starting with Z, from Z1 through Z31. The name stuck, Los Zetas. That made Los Zetas the first cartel built entirely by professional killers. What made Los Zetas different wasn't just their training, it was their mindset. These men had spent years learning how to break insurgencies, how to control populations through fear, how to gather intelligence and eliminate threats with surgical precision. They brought military discipline to a criminal world that had never seen anything like it. While other cartels operated like gangs, Los Zetas functioned like an occupying army. They had ranks, radio codes, and tactical formations. Z1 through Z40 were not just nicknames, they were military call signs that represented a chain of command. They established training camps that looked exactly like military facilities. New recruits underwent weeks of intensive combat training, weapons handling, and psychological conditioning. They learned to move in formation, communicate through encrypted radios, and execute operations with military precision. The original 31 Zetas were armed with weapons that other cartels could only dream of. SAW 5.56mm machine guns with 700-round magazines. Remington Model 700 sniper rifles. South African LAW bazookas. This was not street-level firepower. This was military-grade warfare equipment. They wore tactical uniforms, used night vision goggles, and operated with communication systems that rivaled government forces. When they moved through territory, they did not sneak around like traditional criminals. They rolled in convoys like an invading army. But here is what made them truly terrifying. They understood that in warfare, fear is the ultimate weapon. And Los Zetas were about to weaponize fear like Mexico had never seen. Most cartels, even the violent ones, pretended to follow certain rules. They claimed to protect civilians, avoid unnecessary chaos, and focus only on business. Los Zetas rejected that completely. Where other cartels tried to blend into communities, Los Zetas conquered them. They did not just want to control drug routes, they wanted to control everything. Every business, every person, every breath of air in their territory. They targeted civilians systematically. Migrants traveling through Mexico became their personal cash machines, kidnapped, tortured, and murdered if they could not pay ransoms. Small business owners were forced to pay taxes or watch their shops burn. Entire towns lived under their boot. In San Fernando, they turned bus stations into hunting grounds. Passengers were pulled off buses and sorted like cattle. Those who could pay lived. Those who could not became statistics in mass graves. In August 2010, 72 migrants were found dead in a single location. By April 2011, authorities discovered 193 bodies in 40 pits in the same area. They did not just kill their enemies. They made art out of murder. Bodies hanging from bridges became their calling cards. Decapitations were their signature. They filmed torture sessions and posted them online like movie trailers. Miguel Trevino Morales, who would later be known as Z40, perfected a torture method he called El Guiso, the stew. Victims were placed in oil drums, doused with gasoline, and burned alive. He forced other prisoners to watch, breaking their will before recruiting them or killing them. They developed a coded language of violence. If a body was found without a tongue, the victim had been an informant. Missing hands meant theft. Missing eyes meant they had seen something they should not have. That is why they were feared more than respected. Other cartels might kill you for crossing them. Los Zetas would kill you for existing in the wrong place at the wrong time. Drug trafficking was just the beginning. Yes, they moved cocaine, marijuana, and later fentanyl across borders. But drugs were only part of their empire. Los Zetas built the first truly diversified criminal corporation. They ran extortion rackets that made the mafia look like amateurs. Every business in their territory paid tribute, from corner stores to multinational corporations. Refuse to pay and your family disappeared. The monthly tax was not negotiable. It was the price of breathing in Zeta territory. Kidnapping became an industrial operation. They had safe houses, processing centers, and specialized teams. Rich targets paid millions. Poor targets became slaves or organ donors. They kidnapped entire families, holding children as collateral, while parents emptied bank accounts. Human smuggling turned into human trafficking. Migrants were not just transported, they were commodities. Women were sold into prostitution. Men were forced into labor. Children simply vanished into networks that stretched across Central America and into the United States. But here is their most audacious move. They started stealing Mexico's oil. Not just siphoning gas from trucks, they tapped directly into government pipelines, stealing millions of barrels. They built their own distribution networks, competing directly with the state-owned petroleum company Pemex. They hired petroleum engineers, sometimes by kidnapping them and forcing them to work. They constructed sophisticated tapping operations that could extract thousands of gallons per day. By 2014, they controlled an estimated 40% of Mexico's illegal fuel market, generating over $1 billion annually. Coal mining became another revenue stream. In Coahuila, they forced entire communities to work in illegal mines, producing 10,000 tons of coal per week. The profits were at least $25 million per year. In many areas, they functioned like an occupying army, not a drug cartel. They collected taxes, provided security, and administered their own brutal justice system. Towns had to pay for the privilege of existing. Businesses needed permission to operate. Even local police had to ask permission to patrol. They created a network of informants that rivaled East Germany's Stasi. Taxi drivers, taco vendors, shoe shiners, even children reported information to Los Zetas. They called police officers who worked for them polietas. By 2010, Los Zetas controlled more territory than any other criminal organization in Mexican history. 11 states lived under their shadow. Their influence stretched into 43 countries worldwide. But success bred its own destruction. As Los Zetas expanded, they needed more soldiers. The problem was there were not enough elite military deserters to fill their ranks. They changed their recruitment strategy completely. They recruited through coercion. Young men in their territories were not asked to join, they were told. Refuse, and your family paid the price. Entire neighborhoods became recruitment zones. where teenage boys simply disappeared one day and returned weeks later as trained killers. They established forced enlistment programs. Teenagers were kidnapped and taken to training camps where they were broken down and rebuilt as killers. Those who cried during torture training were executed. Those who survived became child soldiers, some as young as 12 years old, receiving full adult salaries. They created prison pipelines. Los Zetas infiltrated Mexico's prison system, recruiting inmates with promises of money and protection. When these criminals were released, they became foot soldiers. They also recruited from Guatemala's military, bringing in former Caibiles, special forces soldiers known for their brutality. They even recruited women, creating a special unit called Las Panteras, the Panthers. These women used seduction to get close to targets, then killed them. Ashley, La Comandante Bombon Naro Lopez, led this unit until her arrest in 2009 for murdering a general. Over time, this caused discipline to collapse. The original Zetas were professional soldiers with years of training and military discipline. The new recruits were street thugs with assault rifles and a taste for violence. The organization that had once moved with military precision began to fracture. Different cells started operating independently. Some focused on drugs, others on kidnapping, still others on pure extortion. Internal conflicts erupted. Z40, Miguel Trevino Morales, emerged as the most ruthless leader, but his sadistic methods alienated even hardened criminals. Stories spread of him cooking enemies alive in oil drums, feeding victims to his exotic animals at his private zoo, and forcing prisoners to fight to the death for his entertainment. Former CIA pilot William Plumley recounted one horrific episode. Los Zetas captured a grandmother and her 9-year-old granddaughter. The girl's brother had allegedly sold weapons to a rival cartel. For this, the girl was killed and buried alive with her Labrador. Her grandmother was beheaded at her granddaughter's grave after being forced to watch. The monster was eating itself. The downfall began with a split that nobody saw coming. In 2010, Los Zetas broke away from the Gulf Cartel completely. What started as a security force had become more powerful than their employers. The Gulf Cartel tried to rein them in, but it was too late. The split triggered a war that turned northeastern Mexico into a battlefield. Former allies became mortal enemies. Cities like Reynosa and Nuevo Laredo became ghost towns as civilians fled the violence. The breaking point came when Samuel Metro III Flores Borrego, a Gulf Cartel lieutenant, killed Sergio El Concord, 3 Pena Mendoza, a Zetas lieutenant, over control of drug corridors in Reynosa. Los Zetas demanded the Gulf Cartel hand over the killer. When they refused, Miguel Trevino issued an ultimatum. He said, "Hand over my friend's killer, you son of a bitch. You have until the 25th. If you don't comply, war will begin." The Gulf Cartel ignored the order. On January 30th, Trevino's men kidnapped and executed 16 Gulf Cartel supporters in Reynosa. The massacre marked the beginning of months of shootouts throughout Tamaulipas. But Los Zetas faced a bigger problem. They had made too many enemies. The Sinaloa Cartel, the Gulf Cartel, La Familia Michoacana, every major criminal organization in Mexico united against them. They formed an alliance called Anti-Zetas, with one goal: complete annihilation. El Chapo Guzman was so determined to defeat Los Zetas that he allegedly recruited Colombian guerrillas and MS-13 gang members. The Sinaloa Federation even created a group called Mata Zetas, Zeta Killers, specifically to hunt down Los Zetas members. The Mexican government, under pressure from the United States, launched Operation Veracruz, specifically targeting Los Zetas. They dismantled communication networks, seizing 167 antennas, 155 repeaters, 166 power supplies, 1,466 radio receivers, and 71 computers in a single operation. Then came the Casino Royale massacre in 2011. Los Zetas firebombed a casino in Monterrey, killing 52 innocent people. The attack was so brutal so senseless, that it turned Mexican public opinion completely against them. President Calderón declared them terrorists. The United States offered bounties of $5 million for their leaders. Even other cartels distanced themselves from the violence. The Veracruz massacre followed in September 2011. The Los Zetas dumped 35 tortured bodies on a busy highway in Veracruz, all connected to Los Zetas. It was a warning. This is what happens to anyone who cooperates with Los Zetas. By the end of 2011, around 100 Los Zetas members had been killed in Veracruz alone. The organization that had once seemed invincible was bleeding members faster than it could recruit them. The end came faster than anyone expected. In October 2012, Heriberto El Verdugo Lascano, Z3, the strategic mastermind who had held the organization together, was killed in a shootout with Mexican Navy forces in Coahuila. His body was stolen from a funeral home by his own men, but the damage was done. Lascano had been the brains of the operation, the one who maintained discipline and strategic vision. With him gone, Los Zetas lost their military structure and became just another violent gang. Miguel Trevino, Z40, took complete control, but his reign of terror was short-lived. In July 2013, he was captured without a single shot being fired. The man who had terrorized Mexico for over a decade was taken down by a simple traffic stop outside Nuevo Laredo. The arrest was almost anticlimactic. Trevino was driving a pickup truck with 2 armed men when they were stopped by a military helicopter and ground forces. He surrendered immediately, his face swollen and covered with abrasions when he appeared in custody. With their leaders dead or imprisoned, Los Zetas fragmented completely. Splinter groups emerged: the Northeast Cartel, the Old School Zetas, and dozens of smaller factions fighting over scraps of territory. Omar Trevino Morales, known as Z42, Miguel's brother, tried to hold the organization together, but he lacked his brother's ruthless charisma. He was arrested in March 2015, effectively ending any hope of reunification. The organization that had once controlled 11 Mexican states and operated in 43 countries was reduced to scattered gangs of thugs with no central command, no strategic vision, and no discipline. Internal wars erupted between the fragments. The Northeast Cartel and Old School Zetas became enemies, fighting each other as viciously as they had once fought rival cartels. Territory that had been unified under Los Zetas became a patchwork of competing factions. Los Zetas didn't just fall, they poisoned everything they touched. They transformed Mexican organized crime from a business into a reign of terror. The tactics they pioneered included mass kidnappings, public executions, and social media psychological warfare. Those tactics became standard practice for every cartel that followed. They militarized the drug war in ways that Mexico has not recovered from. Today's cartels use armored vehicles, military-grade weapons, and combat tactics because Los Zetas proved they worked. The Jalisco New Generation Cartel, currently Mexico's most powerful criminal organization, operates using the Los Zetas playbook. Most tragically, they normalized violence against civilians. Before Los Zetas, cartels mostly killed each other. After Los Zetas, everyone became a target. The concept of plata o plomo, meaning silver or lead, evolved into plata o plomo o muerte, meaning silver, lead, or death, for everyone you know. The numbers tell the story. During their peak years, 2006 to 2012, over 70,000 people died in Mexico's drug war. Thousands more simply disappeared. Mass graves are still being discovered across their former territories. In 2014, 43 students disappeared in Ayotzinapa. That crime bore the hallmarks of Los Zetas methodology, even though they were not directly involved. They pioneered the use of social media as a weapon of fear. Los Zetas were the first cartel to use Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube to spread fear, recruit members, and communicate with rivals. They created an entire digital propaganda machine that other cartels copied. Their franchise model of expansion became the template for modern organized crime. Instead of trying to control everything from a central location, they created semi-autonomous cells that could operate independently while maintaining brand loyalty. This made them harder to destroy, but also more prone to fragmentation. But here's the most chilling part. Los Zetas proved that the most dangerous criminals are not born in poverty or desperation. They are created when the very institutions meant to protect us become corrupted. 31 elite soldiers betrayed their oath and created a nightmare that lasted over a decade. They showed the world what happens when military training meets criminal ambition, when discipline serves evil instead of good. Their corruption spread beyond Mexico. Los Zetas established operations in Guatemala, where they recruited former Caibiles. They worked with Italian and Ndrangheta in Europe. They created supply chains that stretched from Colombia to Russia. They proved that modern organized crime is truly transnational. Today, the fragments of Los Zetas continue to operate, but they are shadows of their former selves. The Northeast Cartel controls parts of Tamaulipas and Nuevo León, but they are constantly fighting the Gulf Cartel, the Jalisco New Generation Cartel, and their former allies in the old-school Zetas. They have lost the military discipline that once made Los Zetas so effective. The old-school Zetas, led by Jose El Comandante Tato Valencia, operate in central and eastern Mexico, but they are more like a traditional criminal gang than the paramilitary organization Los Zetas once was. Neither group has the territorial control, financial resources, or operational capability that Los Zetas possessed at their peak. They are regional players in a game now dominated by the Jalisco New Generation Cartel and the Sinaloa Federation. But their legacy lives on in ways that continue to shape Mexico's security landscape. The Mexican military learned hard lessons from the Los Zetas experience. They have implemented stricter psychological screening, better pay and benefits, and more robust anti-corruption measures. But the damage was done. Public trust in military institutions was severely damaged. The United States increased its involvement in Mexican security affairs, providing intelligence, training, and equipment specifically designed to counter paramilitary criminal organizations. The Merida Initiative, launched in 2008, was largely a response to the Los Zetas threat. Mexican society itself was transformed. The casual violence that Los Zetas normalized changed how people interact, where they travel, and how they view their own government's ability to protect them. Entire regions of Mexico still bear the psychological scars of living under Los Zetas' control. The international community recognized that modern organized crime had evolved beyond traditional law enforcement capabilities. Los Zetas were designated as a transnational criminal organization by the United States, placing them in the same category as terrorist groups. Los Zetas rose from Mexico's most elite military unit and fell into fragments of their former terror. They proved that sometimes the greatest monsters are the ones we train ourselves. Their story isn't just about crime, it's about the corruption of power, the price of violence, and the thin line between protector and predator. They showed the world that military training without moral foundation creates not heroes, but demons. In the end, Los Zetas destroyed themselves through the same violence that built them. Their brutality made them too many enemies. Their expansion made them too visible. Their success made them too arrogant. But their legacy remains a warning. When institutions fail, when corruption spreads, when violence becomes normalized, the very people trained to protect society can become its greatest threats. Subscribe to Inform Secreto to continue exploring the hidden stories behind power. Real stories told, unfiltered. See you soon.